So welcome everyone to the EOcafe, where the EO community meet. Happy today to have some special guests. Just for anyone who's not joined before, I'm not sure, but we do get new attendees. Just the rules of the EOcafe. It's a conversation between myself and our guests. You're invited to listen in. You're invited to make some questions, to place questions. Please put them into the chat. And then if we take your question, then I'll ask you to open your microphone to come into the conversation. So in the meantime, please keep all the microphones off unless you're actually on the stage. And but you're very welcome to keep cameras on. And it's a nice way just to see people and to keep in contact. So our talk today is about environmental economic accounting, or natural capital accounting. For some time, economists have studied how to consider the value of natural resources consumed or of natural resources destroyed, and to include this within the business planning of projects. Since early this year, the system of environmental economic accounting, the SEEA, has become recognized by the United Nations formally, and provides a standard framework for others to follow and for making such calculations. So we have three very involved guests today. It's a subject I find very interesting, even though I don't know a lot about it, and I'm hoping to find out more today. Our three experts on the subject, Alessandra Alfieri is the Chief Environmental Economic Accounts Section Economic Statistics Branch at the United Nations. Jan-Erik Petersen is at the European Environmental Agency. For those last 5 years, he's focused on natural capital accounting, according to the coordinate ecosystem accounting work at the Jan-Erik has been coordinating natural capital accounting work at the EEA, and also internationally with the relation to the EU and other international partners. And Mark Paganini, who many of you will know, serves as Technical Officer and the Director of Earth Observation at the European Space Agency. His main field of expertise is in the exploitation of EO satellite data for environmental governance and sustainable development. And I'm going to start with Mark because he will complement what I've said, and maybe even correct what I've said, and provide an overview of the context of the talk that we're going to address, the subject we're going to address today. So please, Mark, please take the floor.
Thanks, Joe, for inviting me with my colleagues Alessandra and Jan-Erik to present these new international standards on ecosystem accounting. So I must say that the idea to have an EOcafe on this emerging subject came from Monica and myself, while we were discussing the importance to raise awareness of this new concept and present these opportunities it creates for the Earth observation community. And I must say that most of the companies attending today are already producing a number of ecosystems accounts, but they probably don't know, or at least they don't know that there are policies that regulate or will regulate the production of these national accounts, both at UN and European levels. Here I must also say that ESA will issue a first call on Earth observation for ecosystem accounting next month. It's as part of a broader activity called People for Pioneer Earth Observation Application for the Environment. So another good reason for you to pay attention to these discussions today. So with this slide, this single slide, I try to explain what has been the process that brought to these new standards on ecosystem accounting. You see the UN calendar on the left and the European calendar on the right. Alors, first, it's important to understand that this new standards finds its roots in the SEEA, so the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, and especially its central framework, CF. And CEA provides the framework for statistics on the environment and its relation to the economy. So this standard was officially adopted by the UN Statistical Commission in 2012, so already 10 years ago. In Europe, the legal basis for the European environmental account is the EU regulation number 691 from 2011. And there were a few amendments to this, and it's coordinated by Eurostat. So also 10 to 11
Is Mark? Mark seems to. Was it just me that went silent, or was it go silent for everybody?
No, Jeff, for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Emmanuel. I didn't like to interrupt too quickly because I thought it was just me. Okay, well, let me just give Mark a couple of seconds to rejoin.
And Jan-Erik also drop off, actually.
As well.
Yeah.
Oh, Jan-Erik's still with us.
Is it?
I see his camera. Yeah, we hear you, Jan-Erik.
Okay.
I see your head moving, which is the real key. Okay. I hope Mark is going to be able to rejoin us. If not, we'll because he was setting the scene for everybody. But I think okay, let's move on. So Alessandra, we've talked about the SEEA. Can you tell us about the introduction of this at the UN? And in passing, just a question for me, is there any difference between this and the process for natural capital accounting?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I mean, first of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to actually present in this I mean, and talking to a new basically community for us, which I think will be quite important in the implementation of the accounts. So what was in Mark's slide is really the adoption of the SEEA of ecosystem accounts in March, which represents a major milestone for the statistical community, but I would say not much beyond the statistical community, because it actually received a lot of attention from the press. Actually, we were in front pages, even I mean in the Italian newspaper, surprisingly. And also from the management of the not only of the United Nations but also of the EU. So basically, people have basically called the SEEA, especially the ecosystem accounts, as a game changer, because it basically allowed to bring nature on the same level as the economy. So it's really going beyond GDP. It's no more, I mean, decisions cannot only be taking into account the environment, the economy, but also they need to be much more encompassing and looking at the environment. And what the SEEA does is it provides this the same language and the same framework that is used for economic statistics, and thus it's possible for decision makers to better understand the language and the way of doing things and taking nature into accounts. So if next slide, please. So if we look at a little bit more in detail what the SEEA is, I mean, as Mark said, we had two volumes. One was the SEEA Central Framework, which was adopted as a statistical standard in 2012. And the other is the Ecosystem Accounts, which was adopted in was adopted last March. And they are basically two sides of the same coin. The Central Framework focuses in particular on the economy and how the economy uses the environment in terms of uses of natural resources and then return back to of emissions. And the ecosystem accounts, the important feature is that it takes a spatial approach. So it actually measures the functioning of the ecosystems and their relationship with the economy and people more in general. So next. So if we go a little bit more in depth on what the central framework is, so the important thing, first of all, to note is that the economy sits within the environment. And this is very much a transformational change of paradigm, because the economy basically is not unbound, cannot grow as much as it wants. It has to take into account the environment. And what the SEEA central framework does is, within the economy, it measures activities and the economic instruments that are related to the environment. So it looks, for example, at economic activities of businesses, households, and governments, and look at how much is spent, let's say, for protecting the environment, how big is the environment industry, or and it also looks at exchanges of some of these environment-related products, including, for example, energy or water, between the different economic units. And then there are the economic instruments, which are also quite important, like environmental taxes and subsidies. And the importance of having this integrated into a common framework is that it allows to measure the spillovers and the trade-off. So suppose an energy tax is introduced, then what is the impact on the economy, on the environment, but also on eventually on people and society. So what the SEEA, also the part of the environment that the SEEA measures is basically the relationship with the economy in terms of these natural inputs and the returns in terms of residuals, so emission into water, emission into air, and waste. Then, and it also measures the individual assets that are within the environment, so the timber, the mineral and energy resources, the water, and so on. That are part, let's say, of a definition of a natural capital. What we do with the ecosystem accounts, next, is we actually broaden the scope, and we look at the ecosystem as an integrated, at the functioning of ecosystem as an integrated entity, and the function and the relationship between the biotic and abiotic component within the ecosystem. So what we define in ecosystem accounting is a spatial area, and that could be a country, it could be an administrative region, it could be a river basin. And what we do is we basically identify ecosystem units, what each ecosystem is a contiguous, let's say each area is divided into different ecosystems that are contiguous. And each ecosystem is classified according to an ecosystem typology. So it is quite important to define, to have agreed sets of classification that allow to measure the in a consistent way over time and across countries, these the ecosystems, the ecosystem types. So next. So if we take, for example, a forest ecosystem, what we do is we measure the extent of this ecosystem asset, that is the area of this ecosystem asset. We measure the condition, which basically is the quality of the ecosystem. And for example, one of the examples could be the soil depth. There is a typology actually of condition indicators and condition variables by ecosystem type that we have defined as part of the ecosystem process. And here I think very much there is a relationship between the work that you are doing in developing this Earth observation data sets in supporting the implementation of the accounts. And then we have the ecosystem services, basically that in this case, the biomass of forest actually filters water and cleans it as part of this filtration process. So we have the ecosystem services, which is the contribution of the ecosystem to the economy and to people, is basically the filtration of water. And then we have the benefit, which is the water which is cleaner. And it is what then is used by the beneficiaries, which are the, could be households or businesses or people more in general. So this is a little bit the model of the ecosystem accounts. So we look at the extent, so the area, which is actually based on ecological characteristics. Then we look at the condition of the different ecosystems based on a set of indicators on variables and indicators. And then we look at the services that the ecosystem provide and the benefits. and then link it to the beneficiaries. So this is, I mean, it's kind of a simple model, but it uses the same accounting structure and the same rigor that is used with economic statistics. So what we do is we extend the asset boundary to take into account also ecosystems. So we look at, and here the question that Geoff had, what is the relationship between the SEEA and natural capital accounting? The SEEA is basically the statistical framework for natural capital accounting. So basically natural capital is basically what the proposition is to consider not only produced capital, which is the capital, for example, bridges, building, houses, machines that are within, that are part of the economic statistics, but also add it with the natural capital, so with nature. And this, which includes also these sets of ecosystems. And what the SEA does is actually what the SNA does for economic statistics. So it basically organizes this information in a coherent framework, which is quite rigorous and applies the same accounting condition with the same accounting framework as the system of national accounts. And these two systems actually speak to each other. So next. So, I mean, this is just to say that now our next big challenge is promoting the implementation of the accounts. So basically now we do have a standard, but this is just the initial step. We do need actually to implement in countries. We have 34 countries that are implementing the SEEA ecosystem accounts. And there is quite a bit of interest in moving the implementation forward. And there are also a lot of opportunities because there is opportunities to use global databases and Earth observation to try at least to compile a level 1 or a stage 1 ecosystem accounts that can be for all countries. And then the objective here is actually to nationalize these ecosystem accounts and basically make them, improve them with the national data sets and have them adopted at the country level. We have developed a tool which is called Areas for SEEA, which is an artificial intelligence-based tool, which using global data sets and global models allows to compile ecosystem extent and some ecosystem condition and some ecosystem services for the whole world. And we are testing it in a number of countries at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. Thanks. I come back on one or two points on that, but maybe let's bring Jean-Eric into the discussion. So Jean-Eric is Jan-Erik is at the EEA, as we've said, and is looking at the European dimension of this. So how does this fit into EU policies, and how is the process foreseen as being used within the EEA and Eurostat and the European policy development? Jan-Erik.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Happy to present here. I'm speaking on behalf of the partners in the European Commission as well, where we cooperate with Eurostat, the Statistical Office of the European Union, DG Environment, the Joint Research Center, and DG RTD. We've been active since around 2014 to develop an EU ecosystem accounting system, which corresponds to the SEEA model. So ecosystem extent and condition accounts, ecosystem service flow accounts, as well as evaluation of benefits we derive from natural capital. The pilot phase concluded in 2020. And so the current focus is on extension and implementation as Alessandro already hinted at. And if I could have the next slide. We have published the report that describes how ecosystem extend accounts, selected ecosystem condition accounts, and in quite a range of ecosystem service accounts have been calculated for the EU 27. That's available on the web. Obviously, I give a web page where that product could be reviewed, as well as other outputs of the Inca partners could be accessed. And I thought, even though I'm sure many of you know about it, I would also list here another useful web page that links ecosystem accounting and Earth observation. It's a working group under the GEO partnership, Earth observation for ecosystem accounting. So I keep it very short, but I would like to say a few words on the next slide regarding the policy context. And then I conclude, on the data dimension, which is really what connects Earth observation and ecosystem accounting. We have really serious recognition of the need to tackle climate and biodiversity crisis in European policy. I'm sure everyone has heard about the European Green New Deal, which covers many environmental dimensions, but also addresses transformation of components of the economy and also consumer behavior. For example, in the farm to fork strategy, which foresees measures in the common agriculture policy, but also information and other signals to consumers to, for example, consume less meat or to favor certain types of more environmentally friendly products. One important context in terms of implementation of accounts is the LULUCF regulation. It's somewhat separate or somewhat different to ecosystem accounts in the way it views the environment and divides the environment, but obviously the land use sectors an important way of understanding the environmental impact and the climate emissions and climate storage potential is through land cover data. And land cover data are also a key component of ecosystem accounting. So that's something that we explore in Europe in the context of unifying our different accounting approaches and developing ecosystem accounts. It's not easy because they come from different traditions and with different objectives, but it's worth bearing in mind. And in terms of anchoring the ecosystem accounting work that we have pioneered for the EU, more or in the entire European Union, Eurostat is now developing a module for ecosystem accounting, which will be included in the EU Environmental Accounts Regulation. That is then a statistical obligation on the member states. So the statistical offices would then have to produce accounts after a certain introduction period, of course. This again relates very closely to SEEA, but remains on the biophysical side. So extend accounts, selected ecosystem condition accounts variables, and a range of ecosystem service accounts are proposed as elements all member states have to address. And then each member state, depending on the interest and the capacity, can, of course, include additional variables or develop more detailed divisions on ecosystem types, for example. So there is really a serious effort in the European Union to ensure that ecosystem accounts become part of the standard environmental information data set that policymakers deal with. And data set would be the keyword for the final slide, because there's no accounts, there's no environmental reporting without data as such. And one of the elements that we have considered important in the accounting approach is the opportunity to produce structured sets of data with spatial reference that one can combine in an integrated manner. And I just show here that once one has good data that are combined in one integrated platform, they can serve many different purposes, accounts as well as other analytical questions. And then they can underpin different types of policy domains, whether they are more environmentally focused or more sector policy focused. And it's obviously something that we are investing in as the body in the European Union that has a major responsibility for environmental data and environmental information. So we have developed our own integrated data platform, and we're working with data cubes that we derive from the Copernicus land monitoring service and other Earth observation data. There's just a need to combine Earth observation data also with data on the socioeconomic dimension, where Earth observation provides only partial insight, and also with regard to more complex biodiversity variables, species richness, population sizes, maybe also vegetation types beyond land cover forest or land cover grassland. And so we also want to develop additional monitoring products to have then a good package of Earth observation data to other data for a good data platform for solid ecosystem accounts. And that would be my final word. Thank you for inviting me to speak.
Okay, thank you. So these will get integrated into GDP measures, or are they measures that sit alongside GDP, so that there are different trends, say on, I don't know, timber resources or minerals?
Yeah, I mean, Alessandra will or probably also answer, but I would say for the EU, in the INCA report, we have used the SEEA methodology to actually calculate the monetary value of ecosystem services in particular. But that's currently a number that stands alongside GDP. The integration to GDP is a way off, but there is a clear effort to convert the biophysical measurement into measurements that economic policymakers or business understand better. It's about 2% what we have calculated in relation to total GDP of the European Union. So it's maybe not as large as we might think. Then again, agriculture has a GDP of 2% as well, more or less. And then it's absolutely essential to our survival. We can then discuss this further, how we use such monetary valuation data. But there is that work has been done in the European Union to achieve valuation.
Okay, maybe we come back to it, but let me. Mark's managed to rejoin us, so let me give Mark the floor to sort of round off this part of the discussion, and then we can carry on with some of these other points. Mark.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to have been cut off. I hope that you get anyway the flow of information. What is important is that these regulations have already been adopted at the UN levels, and I don't know if Jan-Erik said it, but next year there will be a new module as an amendment to the regulation on ecosystem accounting, as an amendment to the current regulations on environmental economics accounts. So these are policies, and that's what is important. And another point that is very essential that you understand in that these accounts will underpin a number of policy domains. So before you're opening the floor to questions, I wanted to show you a couple of slides on the opportunities and the challenges to integrate Earth observation in this national ecosystem accounting. Now, first of all, it should be clear, and I think it was clear from my colleagues here, that ecosystem accounts are spatial accounts. which means that they strongly depend on the availability of spatially explicit data sets, which includes Earth observations. Second, the emergence of satellite data streams from the Sentinels with free and open and long-term data policies, combined with the advances in digital technologies, offer really new opportunities for countries to efficiently monitor the extent conditions of the ecosystems and derive estimations of ecosystem services, and finally implement the ecosystem accounting. So it's all good, let's say, on our sides, but there are a number of challenges. And the community must be well aware, and I try to summarize them in terms of statistical accounts, enabling infrastructures, and then the challenges that are specific to the three types of ecosystems accounts. So starting first with the integrations of Earth observation in statistics accounts. First, this requires a change of mindset in the national statistical offices, and they need to use more Earth observation in their practices. And easy to say, but it's not so easy to do. But it's important to keep this in mind. Second, it requires to involve experts from different fields, statisticians, ecologists, because it's essentially about environment, national mapping agencies, but also geospatial experts and Earth observation experts. Third, the account must be consistent in space and time, and this is really essential. And every time you talk to statisticians, they talk about consistency. Consistency is really key, and these accounts must be provided with a precise estimations of the uncertainties in order to be used in official statistics. So consistency and estimations of uncertainties are essential. And then the update, I mean, they must be updated regularly and with a frequency of update that is related actually to the inherent variations of the subject accounts. And so we need, if we compare this to the Copernicus services, a lot of the Copernicus services are not sufficiently updated in order to cope with the national accounts. This is what the point I wanted to stress. Regarding the enabling infrastructures, we need to establish an Earth observation data flow strategy that is similar to what we did, what we are doing in the SDGs, and this is really essential. And I must say that the statistical community expect to have what they call account-ready data sets, which is similar to the concept of analysis-ready data, but here for integrations into official statistics. So we're in the making of defining what is an account-ready data sets, but keep this in mind. I mean, the statistical offices will want data that they can easily integrate it into their processes. And this means that they need really practical guidelines on data sets and tools and models with operational examples. And actually at the end, what they need is a sort of accounting data factory that enables country to have a seamless access to account-ready data, following the FAIR principles of findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. So these are really important points that I wanted to stress to you. Moving to the next slide, which is my last slide, I wanted also to go on the specific account. It was already said, I think, by some of my colleagues, on the ecosystem extent. It's important to understand that the classification of ecosystem types is the backbone of all ecosystem accounts. So for the Earth observation community, the challenge is to develop reliable mapping of ecosystem types that goes beyond our traditional land cover, land use, and land cover change mapping. We must link to the adopted ecosystem typologies, such as those of IUCN. IUCN is this global ecosystem typology, but at UN level, there is the UNIS typology, which might become the standard, still to be defined, for ecosystem accounting. On ecosystem condition, I would say that the biggest challenge is to develop reliable metrics on the conditions of ecosystems, and this for all types of ecosystems. So we gave a lot of examples on terrestrial, but it's terrestrial, freshwater, and marine ecosystems. And I can say that on marine ecosystem, there is we're lacking behind. There are really lacking information on both extended conditions. So, and we don't only need to estimate the conditions, but we also need to estimate the distance from a reference conditions. And here there are discussions about what is this reference conditions. So typically these conditions, they are expressed in biotic and abiotic characteristic, but they need to address the three main aspects of ecosystems, which are ecosystem structure, function, and composition. So we are really thinking in ecological terms here. And my last point is on the ecosystem services. Here, the big challenge is to integrate Earth observation with other spatial data sets in reliable ecosystem service modeling. Here we talk really about modeling in order to derive the flows and the changes of the service supplier. And this implies leverage the use of existing and proven modeling tools and platforms, and such as the IRIS systems for SEEA that was presented by Alessandra. And for this, if we don't go through that process, we'll not be able to produce reliable accounts on ecosystem services. So with this, I try to highlight a number of opportunities and challenges that we will be very happy to now to discuss with you in the last 20 minutes of this call. So back to you, Geoff.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. So, I mean, you talked there about ecosystem structure, function, and composition. This is a terminology that's widely used, I presume. Is it possible just to give an example of what those three things are in physical terms?
Yeah, the structure of ecosystems, and of course, from an EO perspective, we work on ecosystem level. These are actually the classes that have been defined in terms of essential biodiversity variables, and moving to ecosystems to genetics, to genetic biodiversity. So the ecosystem structure, functions, and conditions are at the top. The structural variables related to ecosystems are typically, for example, I can give you a very simple example: biomass. Biomass is typically a structural parameter. The vegetation height is typically a structural parameter. And very often we put together with them also the landscape aspects, like the fragmentations and the connectivity. There are more landscape variables, but these are. The functioning is different, because the functioning is typically I would say the chlorophyll content, to give you an example. The phenology at landscape level or at species level is typically a functioning. The dry matters as well in plants is actually how the vegetation is reacting to the availability of water and to the availability of sunlight. So that's really what makes the difference. The composition is just the composition in terms of species. So here we are going into the species level, but still from an ecosystem perspective, of course. So we want to see what are the tree species within a given ecosystem or within an habitat. So these I don't know if my colleagues from the
I think Alessandra is looking to comment from what I believe.
No, I think, I mean, oh, sorry, I'm mute. Oh, no.
No, that's fine.
The explanation that Mark gave now is completely completely correct, and I mean, and I really liked the way he presented this the link between the Earth observation and the statistical world, and I mean, and it is really clear that it is a big jump for a national statistical office who has not been used to work with spatial data to get into this space and to be able to to bring together all the information from the statistical and the geospatial world into something that is coherent, and as Mark was saying, really applying the same standard to be able to elevate this information to the level of official statistics. So it's quite a big step, and I think And it's also, this reflects a little bit the change of role of the National Statistical Office. This started already during the SDG discussion, that basically they have to rely more on the on expertise from other domains. And this is, it's not very common, because National Statistical Offices have been always used to kind of collect their data and disseminate their data. But now they have to actually, they don't have the expertise that is needed to compile, for example, these ecosystem accounts. So they have to play much more a role of coordinator and trying to basically work with other communities to work towards getting this consistency of data, this reliability of data. So passing, let's say, the principles of official statistics to other communities, and bringing all these communities together and speaking the same language. And this is not very very easy for somebody sitting in a national statistical offices who has been doing their work in the corner. So that's the challenge, but it's also, I think, a big opportunities for national statistical offices and for I think other communities to start working together in this space. I mean, just to give you an example, the revision of the SEEA ecosystem accounts involved over 600 experts that actively reviewed and drafted papers for the revision process. And these were not only statisticians, actually mostly they were coming from the environmental economics community, but also from the ecological communities, from NGOs, from academia, so this was a kind of, it was a different process than the usual statistical processes that we usually go through.
So it's a double challenge there in terms of changing process and introducing new ideas. Jan-Erik, in Europe, we've got Eurostat and the national statistical offices. If the focus is on those to change, how's that going to happen? What's happening to try to encourage that change?
Well, there is this interactive process to define the ecosystem accounting module that is to become a statistical obligation. So there's a task force established in which a range of member states cooperate with commission services and invited experts like myself to define what should be the very precise components of the future member state level ecosystem accounts. And this covers extent, condition, and ecosystem services. And once you get in the statistical domain, things are done very rigorously, which means you have clarity and something that is difficult to wriggle out of. But you also need to limit then the obligation, because everyone needs to be able to implement. But I feel it's a productive discussion, and as I said before, there will be room for countries to implement more complex ecosystem accounts if they so want, beyond what the module in the regulation will prescribe. Mm-hmm. But I think a key component is what support countries or any body interested can get in terms of ready-made tools, account-ready data, in terms of advisory capacity experts that help to convert ecosystem parameters or measurements into accounts, and that help to make the best use of accounting results in policy decisions. So I think this is a critical variable, and that's where we also need to provide support via continuation of KIM Inca, webinars, maybe also research projects. And so there's a number of activities that the different services of the Commission and the EEA contribute.
Will Earth observation tools, will that be referenced in the regulation? That's a hot topic.
No. I mean, there will be. It's not a standard setting process. It's kind of a statistical component process. So what will be referenced is that you what are the ecosystem types that you should be able to describe.
Yeah.
And what will be proposed is what is readily implementable, which is what can be done by land cover data, so Earth observation data. And so there will be also very concrete parameters for ecosystem condition, some of which can be derived from Earth observation data, which is why they are considered to be ready for implementation. Others built on environmental reporting or citizens' observations like farm and bird index. So what is currently operational informs what can get into the regulation in terms of components, but individual data sources are not specified.
Well, I think I think of the Water Framework Directive, which is something we've been working with fairly recently, and some countries have introduced the use of Earth observation in the monitoring of the and reporting process, but because it's not recognised in the regulation, many countries do not, because they don't want to spend additional resources on something which is not sort of recognised. So that's sort of the barrier that we see, and why I asked the question about introducing EO into the regulation here.
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. You know, how on the one hand we build on all the effort and all the investment, and it's a balance between kind of pushing new technology and giving space to countries to make their own decisions. And I think it's a rule that unless you have an agreed survey, statistical survey, you know, you wouldn't necessarily prescribe your data source in something like an environmental accounts regulation.
Again,
however, the land cover data and their use, I think an important domain to review is the EU restoration law that DG Environment wants to develop, which is complementary to the accounts, which wants to go beyond existing reporting and really improve the monitoring of ecosystems. And so that's where also innovative elements can be more easily taken up, because there is new domains that are being identified as essential variables to cover. So I think that's a discussion space that is worth watching for the Earth observation community.
Yeah, okay. I don't think it's a question of prescription. I think it's a question of giving the offices, giving the countries the choice, but by inclusion rather than not referencing possible solutions. That seems to be the problem that we see elsewhere. Please feel free to put some questions in the chat. Emmanuel Mondon has put a number of comments in there. I don't think there was really a question. Well, Alessandra's answered the question. On the other hand, there was a question from Dietrich Heinz, so from Cropix. Dietrich, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I would like to come in. I have a bit in mind when I was writing this that I was working for a certain time at the Forestal Institute, and they were doing a site mapping there. And just to explain briefly how much effort they put in, they did that for about 50 years. I mean, hundreds of people went through the forests and they measured every 50 meters the soil and the vegetation there and the geology and so on to describe the ecosystem as well. I mean, to describe them in terms that they can say, yeah, this kind of forest is growing here as good or not. And so what I learned from that, because I was working there as a geoinformatic to make the maps, I mean, what I was learning, it is super, super complex. And at the final stage, they were using then remote sensing more to regionalize the information which they gained. So I think the description of the ecosystem could not have been done by remote sensing, but maybe to regionalize the information so that maybe you see that at a certain place something occurs and which appears maybe like a marker, and then you know, okay, if the same condition is somewhere else or comparable condition, then the same things can appear there. So I think it's more the approach like this to start to describe ecosystems with remote sensing. And yeah, because I think it's really very complex, and we just have a look from space. Yeah.
And if you allow me to say something about that subject, it's clear that for a number of the accounting, especially on the conditions of ecosystems, it's essential to get access to the amazing number of data field collections that country has, because we know that actually that with the dense time series of the satellite data that we have together, and with the capacities we have to handle with this data, with, for example, machine learning type of technology, having access to this amazing amount of informations can help us actually, as you said, to regionalize the approach and actually have a precise accounts even in areas where we don't have any field data. So this is really important. And I want also to come back on the concept of ecosystem restoration, because they are closely linked to the ecosystem accounting. And I was talking actually to DG Environment recently about this idea of involving them in the project I was mentioning that we're doing to study what are the opportunities for us observations in ecosystem accounting. And she came straight to the restoration, because you cannot, you know, in order to do the restoration, to decide what you want to restore, you need first to know where the ecosystems are, what the key habitats are, and in which conditions they are. So for the first two accounts, and the service they provide and how much the service has been affected. If you don't have this type of information, there's no way you can start to have a very reliable restoration program in place. So the two are very interconnected. And actually on the ESA call that we are issuing very soon, we will actually address both ecosystem restoration and ecosystem accounting, because we believe that these are really two high priorities for Europe, where we really need to leverage all the capacities we have in terms of Earth observation.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments there? Otherwise, I realized that Emmanuel Mondon did have a question in his comments, but Jan Erik has since answered that in the question. But Emmanuel, you also have a problem with your video?
Yeah, I'm not able to turn on my video, but I swear I'm not in pyjama. Huh?
No, that's fine. You could be. We don't really care. But
I'd like to share my video as you requested.
I'm a bit more concerned that somehow we've blocked it, because we like to have videos on.
Anyway, yeah, my question was regarding GaiaX. Everybody knows that I'm a big supporter of GaiaX, and geoinformation should play a key role there. By the way, there is an Earth observation expert group within the geoinformation domain working group within GaiaX. And as I saw in one of the EES slides, wording regarding integrated platform, I was asking to Jan Erik Petersen, what about GaiaX in that context? Because accounting ecosystem accounting is a great use case for GaiaX. I'm convinced about that. I urge anyone attending to this call to pay attention to GaiaX and to bring your efforts and expertise and experience into it. Thanks for your answer, Daniel.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, Jeff, the next EOcafe is about GaiaX, right?
No, I'll talk about the next EOcafe as we finish. We could do one in the future. Though. Okay. I guess one question. ERSC, we're here representing companies in Europe and companies supplying Earth observation data or services. So how can the private sector get involved in here? What are you looking for from the private sector to support your work? Alessandra?
Yeah, no, I think that at the heart of this is making available data at different levels that then we can use and integrate into models. So I think that this idea of interoperability between data, but also between models will be quite important. And I mean, what we are seeing also that there are a proliferation of platforms that are happening, often though they don't speak to each other. I mean, it's fine that each agency or each group or each company has its own platform and its own interest, but what it is important, especially for us, I mean, sitting at the United Nations, I mean, we see this as being a global good. So how can we actually access this data and use it for the benefit of the countries, and basically build on the expertise and the work that has already been done. If it becomes, I mean, one big problem that we have is really that we need to pay for this data, and that creates a big hurdle for us. So I wonder whether, I mean, first of all, is how do we better engage with businesses that produce this type of data, and then second, how can we make this data basically freely available, especially for the use of developing countries?
It's a good question. Other comments there, Mark? Maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, what I would say is that there is not one solution that fits all. I said this in the context of the SDGs, but the ecosystem accounting is very similar. It's clear that at the end, it's the national statistical offices that will have to produce their own accounts. They don't do it in isolation. Of course, they will of course organize themselves within their own country. And they don't all have the same profile in terms of ability to integrate Earth observation data into their systems. So the need for global data sets, as was mentioned by Alessandra, is really essential for a number of, especially for a number of developing countries who don't have data. And here, of course, the servicing industry can play a very important role. That is all, I would say, many of the Copernicus services are very, we should do this analysis. I think, I wonder if we should not put a sort of thematic subject in Copernicus to see how the services can serve the ecosystem accounts. But definitely there is place for the service industry to produce this data, but there's also place for the servicing industry to provide the tools for the countries who wants to do the work themselves. We should never forget this. It's not only about data, it's about tools, and then it's about also making accessible these data sets and these tools. And here you have all the platform ecosystems, and here we do know that in Europe we are very well advanced on this topic where we can really play a key role. So there is place for the private sectors in all aspects, I would say, of the ecosystem accounting.
I liked the idea of something you said about having an accounts data factory. That sounded quite a nice concept. I don't know who would put that together, but maybe that's something to think about.
Maybe,
okay.
Geoff, if I can add just something moving forward on the way we are going to organize ourselves. I mean, and I think in Europe there is a similar organization. I see Jan Erik has his hands up. But we are going to move now into organizing ourselves into thematic accounts. So we are going to look at how we can actually generate data and provide guidance to countries on how to compile specific ecosystem accounts. I mean, for example, on forest accounts or ocean accounts, or actually carbon, because it's quite relevant across, so it's cross-cutting issues, and making basically an assessment of what are the global data sets and tools that are available, and how we can actually then bring all what is available and package it and put it. I mean, we are using these areas for SEEA and make it then available for countries to use. And what we are doing at the country level is then also using all this information that they have within their national statistical system to try to nationalize it and integrate them and becoming then nationally owned, because I think it's quite important that the whole country kind of adopts a certain maps. So it's not only developing it, but then that there is agreement between the different ministries that that is actually the map of the country, and then moving on into doing the ecosystem measurements.
So thanks. How does this fit into, how does this fit into COP26?
If I could maybe complement, I think COP26 is really climate change, but climate change, so it's emission reduction and is carbon stocks increase. So it's maybe not so much on the emission reduction side, but you certainly want to utilize the power of ecosystems to help with carbon regulation. And so that's one of the services recognized. And there you need to have information on the extent and condition of ecosystem types. So it really ties in very closely to an overall management of the climate system. But I think the crucial question right now is how we reduce emissions. And I think that will be the main focus of COP26. Alessandra may be better informed. But I would like to come back on the question of how the community of Earth observation companies can engage, and pick up a point that Alessandra referred to, which is, I think, conversation, developing shared knowledge. She referred to different stakeholders, official and others in countries agreeing on the right data set, which could very well be Earth observation based, because it's for many countries the best way to develop their data. And the work they are putting in to build capacity and show examples. That's also the purpose of this GEO group on Earth observation for ecosystem accounting, which has been a bit dormant. I don't know how, I know they worked also in close interaction with UNSD. I was part of it. We did produce last year for them a survey of how Earth observation data can underpin extent, condition, and service accounts. And so the outcome is variable. I'm sure UNSD will build on that in reviewing what data are suitable for what. But it's a potential forum for interaction between producers and users. And it's been mostly users that were in Earth observation in EO for EA, not so much the producers. Mark was also participating, but if you have capacity to try and to reach out to them and revive it, and that's an avenue for dialogue and for understanding and recognition. So that would be my point. And I could provide further details if you wanted to contact.
Okay, thank you. I draw things to a close now. I'll give you each the opportunity to make any last points that you feel you'd like to close with. Alessandra, you're muted.
I hope that this is an initial discussion that we are having with the Earth observation community, because I think that it is very important that we build on the expertise, the knowledge, and the available information that exists in this Earth observation community. I mean, I have put also in the chat a link on this strategy that we wrote on the interoperability of strategy and models for ecosystem accounts. And I think it's quite important that there is a mechanism in which we engage broadly and more consistently with this community. So maybe this is something that to discuss with the EO for EA, and I think that's something that Mark is also part of that group, that we should move this on a more develop a kind of a fora of cooperation between the statistical community and the Earth observation community.
Very good. Yeah, Jan-Erik.
I think that was perfectly put by Alessandra, and I'm not going to add to anything.
Okay, thanks. And Mark, last comment.
I cannot add much to what Alessandra said, because she said it very well. I mean, it's clear that I see it as a big opportunity for the Earth observation community. We start to be organized. I mean, there is this GEO initiative, as was mentioned by Jan-Erik on EO for ecosystem accounting, but we need really to stimulate a bit better that group. But it's clear that we have an opportunity here to do really a very broad analysis of what are the opportunities and the challenges for Earth observation on ecosystem accounting, and that's not something we have yet done. Also, there's been a lot of work. EECA projects of the European Commission is the best one, but none of this analysis has been done with an EA perspective. So it's definitely something. We know that EO is everywhere, but nobody has done this broad analysis, and it's also important to be done in order to know where are the gaps. Where are the gaps in knowledge, but where are the gaps also in terms of use of Earth observation? So this is why we want to really initiate this new activity in ESA, but we will not do it in isolation. And that's the work that we want to do together with EO, with the GEO initiative on Earth observation for ecosystem accounting. But I hope that you understand that this is a big opportunity, because that's a policy. So there will be an obligation for countries to do their national accounting. And second, that these accounts are underpinning a number of important international environmental agreement, including the climate change. You discussed the climate change, but also the CBD, also the UN degradation on. I would say even all convention at the end, all conventions. So if we have good accounts, that will be easy access to data for countries to fulfill their commitments on the other conventions.
Thanks. EO is everywhere is, I think, very true. It's a strength and a weakness. Because it's everywhere, it gets very diluted, and it's hard sometimes to make progress. Whereas it has such a wide application. Thank you very much for sharing the thoughts with us today, and I believe this is a topic that we will come back to, and look forward to talking about it again in not so distant future, I suspect. But I think it is a very important topic, as you've as everyone has emphasised. So once again, thank you all very much for joining us today, and for supporting the EOcafe, and for having this this discussion. Our next EOcafe is on the 4th of November. We're going to talk about the action that the European Commission and ESA have taken with regard to the data supply to the Copernicus contributing missions. So the way in which the CCM is supplying data into the Copernicus program. There's been a request for information launched. I hope everyone is aware of it, but if they're not, the details can be found at that web link that's on the screen in front of you now. Certainly, we've circulated that, and I would encourage everybody, certainly from the private sector, to contribute to the ideas, to respond. So in the next EOcafe, we'll have the Commission with us, who will update us on the consultation and will provide guidance ahead of the workshop they'll organise in relation to this on the 16th and 17th of November. So I think it's this is quite an important issue for the commercial sector. So please be ready to come and join, to respond to this, and to keep in your diary the workshop on the 16th, 17th, which is being announced. There is an invitation for companies to make short pitches at the 16th, 17th, so you may want to look out for that. In the EOcafe, we'll also get an update on the Cassini program, you know, the program that the Commission has launched to help bring finance, make it more available to companies. So that will be the next EOcafe on the 4th of November. Hope to see many of you there. Final reminder for the SEBS workshop. The following EOcafe would be on the 18th of November, but as we have the SEBS workshop, it won't take place on the 18th, but I would encourage all of you to join us in the SEBS workshop and hear about the benefits that Copernicus is delivering for citizens. You may be aware of the work we do there where we're analysing the benefits. The natural capital accounting has a direct relevance in this work, and we need to integrate it further as part of our analysis toolkit. So that will be the 18th, 19th of November. That will be the registrations for that will go out fairly shortly, so you'll get messages regarding the registration for that. So at that point, I close the EOcafe. As usual, anybody who wants to just hang around and open up microphones, and I really do apologize. We're not quite sure what's happened. We haven't changed anything, but obviously Zoom has changed some of the parameters to mean that guests in the call can't open cameras, which we find rather strange. But we'll try to fix that for next time, because we like to see you even if you're in pajamas. But so please, anybody who wishes to stay on, please do so. Open up your microphone at least and join the conversation. And at that point, I'll close the the informal part of the cafe and move to the even more informal part. And thank you, Mark, Jan Erik, and Alessandra for your valuable inputs today.